I'm Dr. Clemens, and we are going to talk about Chapter 3 today, Body Basics. So why learn about chemistry when studying nutrition? Many of you in this field, whether you're a nursing student, a physician's assistant, anything with that particular background, it's going to be important for you to understand about the metabolism and the intermediates, especially when you are trying to understand drugs and diseases that you're dealing with. It's important that you know exactly how this process works in the body, because basically when you boil it all down, your metabolism runs on basic chemistry, and so you need to understand basics of how this works. So let's look at a chart here. So you've got levels of organization in the body. It starts with atoms, goes to molecules, to macromolecules, and then you see as it comes around, cells, then tissues, organs, and your organ system. So your atoms are the fundamental units of life. It goes into the molecules, that's made up of atoms, which is linked together by chemical bonds. Then as your body digests, it's large muscles that diverse in the structure and function. Goes to cells, then your cells together to form tissues that carry out specific functions. And there are more than 40 organs in the human body. Each organ is made up of 2 different types of tissue. And these are different organizational systems in the human body. Each organ system is made up of several organs that carry out specific physiological functions. And just a side note, my daughter and I, she's a sophomore at Auburn University this year, but we were taking a nutrition quiz. And one of the questions was, what is the largest organ in your body? Does anybody know out of the 40 organs? And actually that answer is skin. I thought that was interesting. A fun fact for you today. So an element is a pure substance of only one type of atom. There are actually 92 elements in the human body. 20 are essential to human health, and 6 elements are the most common. They equal 99% of your body weight, and those are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. We have molecules. Molecules are 2 or more atoms that are joined together. They make a chemical bond. There's macromolecules. And macromolecules are the largest molecules, such as protein. They are commonly created by smaller subunits, and the most common macromolecules in biochemistry are nucleic acids, proteins, carbohydrates, and polyphenols. Now, it's interesting to note that any large complex molecule, you're only going to find those in plants and animals. We have a molecular formula for molecules, and that's a chemical formula that shows the total number and kinds of atoms in a molecule. For example, many of you might know what the molecular formula is for water. If you said H2O, you're correct. There's 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Look at this a little bit better or deeper. Some molecules, such as hydrogen, are made of only one type of atom. So you have H2. The subscript indicates there are 2 hydrogen atoms in this molecule. So you see that little number, whatever the number is beside the letter indicates how many. So some molecules are made up of 2 or more types of atoms. So for instance, glucose is made up of C for carbon, so that's 6 carbon, H hydrogen, so that's 12 hydrogen, and then you have oxygen, and then there are 6 atoms in that. And the number in front of the molecule indicates the number of molecules. So if there's a number in front of it, like, for example, this H2O, that means there are 3 water molecules, and each molecule is made up of what? Hydrogen and 2 atoms, and then oxygen, and that's 1 atom. Except there's no number after it, it just automatically means 1. Cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems related. Well, cells, tissues, and organs, as we've mentioned before, are building blocks of life. So when we have a group of similar cells working together, this is called a tissue. For example, muscle tissue is made up of lots of muscle cells. All the cells in tissue look the same and perform the same job. In cell biology, the cytoplasm is the material within a living cell, not including the cell nucleus, but it comprises of cytosol, and cytosol is a gel-like substance enclosed within the cell membrane, and the organelles, the cell's internal substructure. So how these mechanisms gets transported. So when we talk about cellular at a cellular biology level, this refers to the collection of mechanisms that regulate the passage of solutes such as ions and small molecules through the biological membranes, which are lipid bilayers that contain proteins embedded in them. So within that process, we have osmosis. And osmosis is the spontaneous net movement of solvent molecules through a semi-permeable membrane into a region of a higher solute concentrate in the direction that tends to equalize the solute concentrates on both sides. Simple diffusion refers to a process where a substance passes through a membrane without the aid of an intermediary such as an integral membrane protein. Then you have a facilitated diffusion, and that's a process of the spontaneous passive transport of molecules or ions across a cell's membrane via specific transmembrane integral proteins. And I'll show you an example of this on the next page. So then we have active mechanisms. And active mechanisms transports can occur as a direct result of ATP, or by coupling the movement of one substance with that of another. So active transport can move solutes into the cell or out of the cell, but energy is always used to move the solute against its concentrated gradients. Again, I know this is a lot of chemistry, but hopefully it all makes sense when we get finished with this presentation. So let's take a look at this chart. This is a passive transport mechanism. So you've got simple diffusion on the left there, and that's a substance that crosses the cell membrane by moving from a higher concentration to a lower concentration, and that energy is not required. Then it goes into the facilitated diffusion, which we talked about, that crosses the cell membrane with the assistance of a carrier molecule. Energy is not required because the substance moves from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So it's basically the carrier molecule, and then it goes into osmosis. In osmosis, as the water crosses the cell membranes freely, the direction in which the water moves is determined by the concentration of dissolved substances. Water moves by osmosis from a lower concentration to a higher concentration. Then we have the carrier-mediated active transport. So with a facilitated diffusion, this is also called carrier-mediated osmosis. It's the movement of the molecules across the cell membrane via special transport proteins that are embedded within the cellular membrane. So there you can see it's transporting ATP. Let's look at a typical cell. And you can see the cells are surrounded by a membrane that regulates the flow of material in and out of them. And that's your cell membrane. And then you can actually, as you look through this, you can see what a cell is made up of, which I think is just absolutely fascinating. I want to point out that the mitochondrion, which you may have heard before, is what produces most of the energy used by cells. Cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems related. Well, let's talk about the type of tissues. There's epithelial tissue, and that is made up of epithelial cells, which are vastly different from muscle cells, okay? These cells can be flat or columnar. They're joined tightly together, kind of like a quilt. They can be found in the lining of internal cavities and organs. Oops, let's go back. And then you have the connective tissues. The connective tissues make up a connective web inside our body. Holding our body parts together and providing support are the main jobs of this tissue. Then you have muscle tissue. And muscle tissue is made up of excitable cells that are long and fibrous. These cells are ready for contractions or the activation of tension in our muscles, making it possible for us to move our bodies. Within that, you have skeletal and smooth muscles. Your smooth muscle tissues are like the involuntary muscles that you have. Your cardiac muscle tissues and smooth muscle tissues are together. They're involuntary. You can't make them consciously work. But then you have skeletal muscles, and skeletal muscles are voluntarily controlled. So you can activate your skeletal muscles yourself. And then we have neural tissue. And another name for that could be nervous tissue. And it's made up of two parts of the nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord. And actually, the spinal cord, the central nervous, the brain and the spinal cord of the central nervous system, called the CNS, and the branching peripheral nerves of the peripheral nervous system, called PNS, regulates and controls bodily functions and activities. So how are cells, tissues, and organ systems related? Continued. Organs and organ systems. Again, there are more than 40 organ systems in the body. Out of those 11 organ systems, there's the integumentary, the muscular, skeletal, nervous, circulatory, lymphatic, respiratory, endocrine, urinary or excretory, reproductive, and digestive. Although each of your 11 organ systems has a unique function, each organ system also depends directly or indirectly on all the others. These communication systems within our body. The synapses form between the neurons, allowing them to communicate to other neurons in the other systems of our body. So the general flow of information is that the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system, takes information through sensory neurons, then sends it to the central nervous system to be processed. So another one of these systems, the endocrine system, it helps to regulate distant tissues by means of secretions directly into the circulatory system, which is called your endocrine signaling. The major endocrine glands include the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, pancreas, ovaries, testes, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, and adrenal glands. And those are basically responsible for producing a lot of the chemicals in our bodies. Like, for instance, you've heard of testosterone. That would be produced by the endocrine system. So homeostasis is important within the body. It's where it's within the body, the system remains constant. All right, so examples of this might be your body temperature, your pH balance, extracellular fluids, your sodium, potassium, calcium, glucose, blood plasma. Despite the changes in the environment or what it is eaten, each of these variables is controlled by like a regulator, or we call a homeostat, which together maintain life. Homeostats are energy-consuming physiological mechanisms. So here's a great chart that talks about organ systems and their related major functions. So you can look on the left, you've got like a skeletal, and that's your bones, your cartilage, your joints. You look at the endocrine system, there's your pituitary, thyroid, adrenal. You go all the way down to the digestive system, which is your mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, and salivary glands. So you can see what the organs are and the functions of those organs are on the right hand side. So like for example, all the way down at the bottom, your immune system protects against foreign bodies such as bacteria and viruses and helps regulate cell division and cell death. In the middle there we have circulatory, that transports nutrients, waste products, gases, and hormones. All of these systems work together to have to make you healthy, or to help you be healthy and have function properly. Things happen during digestion. That as the food passes through the digestive system, food is digested in the mouth, the stomach, and the small intestine. And digested food is absorbed into the bloodstream, into the small intestine. Excess water is absorbed back into the body, into the large intestine. And so after it's digested, or actually after it goes through the system, it's digested, it's absorbed, and then it's eliminated out of the body. And the time for this to do, once you eat a nutrient, the time for all this to happen is anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. Let's look at the organs of the digestive system. You have the salivary glands, the liver, gallbladder, pancreas, mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. All these have to work together in order to digest our food. So what happens during digestion? The digestive system is a series of hollow organs joined in a long twisting tube from the mouth to the anus. Inside this tube is a lining called the mucosa. In the mouth, stomach, and small intestine, the mucosa contains tiny glands that produce juices to help digest food. So two solid organs, the liver and the pancreas, produce digestive juices that reach the intestine through small tubes. In addition, parts of other organ systems, for instance your nerves and your blood, play a major role in the digestive system. As you eat something, it's moved through a digestive tract, and the chemical breakdown of the large molecules of food into smaller molecules. So digestion begins in the mouth, and you chew and you swallow. It's completed in the small intestine, and the chemical process varies for different types of foods. So what is peristalsis? Peristalsis is a series of muscle contractions, and these contractions occur in your digestive tract. It's also been seen in some organs that connect the kidneys to the bladder, but it's an automatic and important process that helps you get your food to where it needs to go. So the sphincters is what regulate the flow of food. So you can see as it goes into the gastroesophageal sphincters located between the esophagus and the stomach, and relaxes briefly to allow food to enter the stomach. And then after the food passes into the stomach, the gastroesophageal sphincter closes to prevent the stomach contents from re-entering the esophagus. So our digestion begins before anything even enters the stomach. You've got a cephalic phase of digestion, and this gastric secretion occurs before food enters the stomach, especially while it's being eaten. So it results from seeing the food, smelling the food, thinking of the food, tasting the food, and the greater your appetite, the more intense the stimulation is. So then it goes into the mouth and then that starts the physical digestion process with obviously grinding action of the teeth and your saliva, which helps break down that food so it can be digested. Goes into the esophagus, swallowing's in two phases. The bolus pushes back to the pharynx, and then there's voluntary and involuntary things going on there. The peristalsis propels food towards the stomach. So we talked about the gastroesophageal sphincter and the gastroreflux disease, which we have probably all heard of by now. This is also referred to as GERD, G-E-R-D. It's like acid reflux, the long-term condition where stomach contents come back up into the esophagus, resulting in symptoms or complications such as heartburn, bad breath, chest pain, vomiting, breathing problems, and even erosion of your teeth. So as we talked about, there was a voluntary phase and an involuntary phase. So the voluntary phase is where the tongue pushes a bolus of food against the hard palate. Then the tongue pushes the bolus against the soft palate, which triggers a swallowing response. The involuntary phase, which is something that you're not controlling, it's the soft palate rises, which prevents the bolus from entering the nasal cavity. Aren't we glad we don't have to think about that when we're eating, right? And then the epiglottis covers the trachea, blocking the opening to the lungs. So the bolus enters the esophagus and then is propelled towards the stomach by peristalsis. Here's an example of that GERD, of exactly what's happening. You can see where this stuff is coming back up, this acid stuff is coming back up. So what happens during digestion? So it goes into the stomach, and your stomach is a temporary food storage. We're going to wants to figure out where is that stomach going to go, or where is that food in that stomach going to go. So it mixes the food with these gastric secretions. Now, if we're not eating the right type of food, or we don't digest it correctly, our body's not working correctly, it can cause some problems. And some of those problems come in the form of ulcers. So an ulcer is kind of a break in a bodily membrane that impedes the organ of which that membrane is part from continuing its normal functions. Gastrin is a peptide hormone that stimulates secretion of gastric acid, which is also called HCI, by the perineal cells of the stomach and acids in the gastric motility. So then there's chyme, which is a thick semi-fluid mass of partly digested food that is passed from the stomach to the duodenum. Gases empty out of our stomach. You've got the pyloric sphincter, which is a band of smooth muscles at the junction between the pylorus of the stomach and the duodenum of the small intestines. It plays an important role in digestion, where it acts as a valve to control the flow of partially digested food from the stomach. So from there it goes to the small intestine, which the primary site of chemical digestion and nutrients is absorbed. Then we talked about the duodenum, and that produces secretions from the gallbladder and pancreas. And then we have the surface area of the small intestine, which has villi and microvilli. Microvilli increase intestinal absorbent surface areas approximately by 30 to 600 fold. So they provide exceptionally efficient absorption of nutrients in the lumen. The villus capillaries also collect amino acids and simple sugars taken up by the villi, and this is what helps to put those into the bloodstream. So here's a chart of all these things that we've been talking about in the body. There's a picture of your small intestine. And here's your villi that we were talking about. Here's the epithelial cells. So what happens during digestion? Again, the pancreas helps us digest food, and it protects the small intestine from all that acid that's being made from the food. Then you've got your gallbladder, and that gallbladder stores reservoir for bile. It's the dispersion of large fat globules. So the gallbladder's primary function is to store that concentrated bile, and it also produces a yellow brownish digestive enzyme, and actually that comes from the liver. It's important to remember that the gallbladder is part of the biliary tract. Unfortunately, if things don't go well, you can develop gallstones in the gallbladder. And gallstones, if you ever had one, or know of somebody that had one, are quite painful. It's exactly what it says. It's a stone that's formed in that gallbladder out of the bile components. Sometimes some people have them and never have symptoms, but other ones that have symptoms and actually end up passing the gallstone will get terrible, terrible cramps, sometimes fever and vomiting. And it's very important to get those out of the body. Often this can be controlled by healthy weight and eating a diet high in fiber. Basically, anybody that has had a gallbladder attack will oftentimes, if the body doesn't disperse them on their own, then they'll have to have surgery to remove the stones. Okay, so we talked about the pancreas and some of its importance. Here's a picture of the pancreas. The pancreatic juice is a basic solution that neutralizes the acidic enzymes as it enters the duodenum. And then pancreatic juice also contains enzymes that aid in the digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. So after they transfer the nutrients from the lumen, it starts circulating in the blood or the lymphatic systems. And this is where we use a term called bioavailability. So when we talk about this term in nutrition sciences, it's an essential metal is determined by its metabolic utilization. So for this purpose, the concept of total utilization defines the fraction of a nutrient that is ultimately used in metabolism after it's digested, absorbed, and distributed. So basically, the bioavailability of how nutrients are used from the foods that we eat are best utilized if we eat healthy and we have healthy body functions. The healthiest way of eating is a way of eating that should free you from concern about nutrients and their bioavailability, unless you have special health issues that require nutrients in amounts that accommodate your own biochemical individuality. Here's an example of the nutrient absorption and circulation. You can see the epithelial cells there. The water is absorbed to the liver, the blood, lymphatic system. What happens after digestion? Well, we've talked about this. The large intestine, the sphincter between the small and large intestine, helps to get all that nutrients and that waste out of the body. So it helps it go in the right direction so that we can eliminate that waste out of our body. And we need a lot of water and electrolytes in our system to make sure that this system goes and works properly. Otherwise, you can end up getting what we call constipated or diarrhea. And all of those electrolytes and water play a part in how elimination works out of our body. Let's look at the large intestine here. So here's the movement of undigested food. Residue from the small intestine in the large intestine is regulated by the sphincter muscle. And then so here's your rectum, anal canal, colon. So in that large intestine, that environment is ideal for bacterial growth. So that bacterial growth can include microbiota, and actually that term just refers to any bacteria, archaea, protists, fungi, and viruses that can grow in that environment. Bacteria is bad. There are good bacteria also in the system. A lot of times when we think of bacterial, it has a negative connotation, but there are probiotic and prebiotic foods that can help regulate the growth of good bacteria in our systems. And that probiotics are that good bacteria that help keep your digestive system healthy by controlling growth of harmful bacteria. And the prebiotics are carbohydrates, so that's a food that cannot be digested by the human body. They are food for probiotics, but they're made for the prebiotics are made for the probiotics. The probiotics help regulate and help produce the good bacteria. And some of that good bacteria from examples could be like lactobacillus or bifidobacteria, and a lot of times you might see this on a yogurt product that it contains probiotics, and our acidophilus, you might see that on some of the yogurts, but those are what stimulate and help produce the good bacteria. We talked about the sphincter, obviously feces, and let's talk about 2 intestinal disorders. If your bowels are not working correctly, you can get something called irritable bowel syndrome, and irritable bowel syndrome can cause a lot of pain in your belly, gas, diarrhea, constipation. And then inflammatory bowel disease. This involves chronic inflammation of all or part of your digestive tract. And if you've ever heard of Crohn's disease, that's what can result from inflammatory bowel disease. And Crohn's disease can sometimes be life-threatening from the complications. So how does the body circulate nutrients and excrete waste product? The vascular system is important in getting rid of waste products. Like breathing is a job of the lungs. We take air into our body when we inhale, but as air is made of a variety of gases such as nitrogen, oxygen, argon, and carbon dioxide, we need oxygen, but we can't use the other gases. So our cells make carbon dioxide as a waste product from the process of converting food to energy. And that carbon dioxide and some water vapor are removed by the lungs when we breathe and exhale them back into the atmosphere. The lymphatic system is part of the circulatory system and a vital part of the immune system. It comprises a network of lymphatic vessels that carry clear fluids called lymph directly towards the heart. Metabolism is commonly used to refer specifically to the breakdown of food and its transformation into energy. It consists of anabolism, the buildup of substance, and catabolism, the breakdown of substances. And these are how we get our energy. The energy is transformed, is stored energy in nutrients into the form of ATP. So we have several metabolic pathways when this happens. We have enzymes, catabolic pathways, and anabolic pathways, so we just talked about. Your enzymes help assist the metabolic breakdown of vitamins and minerals. And then your catabolic pathways, we talked about, they release the energy, and the anabolic pathways construct the pathways to release the energy. That makes sense? So you have anaerobic, which means without oxygen, and this generates a limited amount of energy. And then you have aerobic, which means with oxygen. So aerobic respiration or cell respiration is the presence of the oxygen that we just talked about uses the end product of glycolysis to the TCA cycle to produce much more than energy currency in the form of ATP. The anabolic pathway requires an input of energy to synthesize your complex molecules from simpler ones. So one example of this might be the synthesis of sugar from a CO2. Other examples might include large proteins from amino acid building blocks, or the synthesis of new DNA strands from nucleic acid building blocks. Just keep in mind these processes are critical to the life cell of the cycle, or the cycle of the life cell. They take place constantly and demand energy provided by the ATP and other molecules.